Good morning, and thank you for being with us on this Thursday, December 11th. What I need to talk to you about today is not about battlefield maps, weapons systems, or the familiar rhythm of military briefings. This is about something far more subtle, yet far more revealing about where this war actually stands. This is a story about the people who should have the strongest faith in Russia's victory and why they are quietly choosing to leave the country. Because right now, beneath official statements and carefully managed language, a different kind of movement is underway. It's happening at Moscow's airports, at lesser-known border crossings, and at private airfields that rarely attract public attention. The people who have benefited most from the current power structure, the ones with every reason to believe their future is secure alongside the Kremlin, are silently packing up and getting out. This is not speculation. These are real, observable actions, and they are accelerating. In recent days, departures from Russia among the wealthy and politically connected have surged in ways that cannot be explained by routine travel. Private jets are filing flight plans out of Moscow at an unusually high rate. Border crossings are seeing long lines of luxury vehicles waiting for hours. These are not vacations. These are not short business trips. These are decisions made under pressure. What makes this moment different is the context. These departures are not following a clear military defeat or a major public policy announcement. They are happening in the wake of arrests targeting senior figures within Russia's own power structure. Those arrests did more than remove specific individuals. They sent a broader, colder message. Proximity to power is no longer a guarantee of safety. And this is where the cracks begin to show. Authoritarian systems do not survive on control alone. They also rely on internal confidence, confidence that loyalty will be rewarded, that silence will be protected, that tomorrow will look like today. When that confidence begins to erode, behavior changes quickly. What we are witnessing is not public panic. It is something more dangerous for any regime. It is the quiet anxiety of the people who understand the situation best, the ones with access to information the public never sees, the ones who understand internal rivalries, succession fears, and the real meaning behind sudden, high-level arrests. When those people conclude that leaving is safer than staying, that becomes a signal no propaganda machine can fully conceal. That is why what is happening at Moscow's airports matters more than any speech or press conference. The steady flow of private jets, the movement of families, and the quiet transfer of assets abroad are not public declarations, but they are confessions. As we begin this story, it's important to be clear about what this moment is and what it is not. This is not a prediction of imminent collapse. It is not evidence of a revolution around the corner. But it is a warning sign, one that history tells us should not be ignored. Because when the people closest to power stop believing the story they are telling everyone else, the truth has already begun to surface. What is happening now becomes clearer when we move from signals to evidence, from impressions to patterns that can be measured and verified. Over the past 72 hours, departures from Russia by high-net-worth individuals and politically connected families have accelerated at a pace that stands out even by the standards of a country accustomed to capital flight. This is not seasonal travel. This is not routine movement. The scale and speed tell a different story. Flight tracking data shows private aircraft leaving Moscow area airports at roughly 3 times their normal rate. These are not short hops to European capitals for meetings or leisure. These are long-haul routes to places known for legal safety, financial discretion, and long-term residency options. Dubai, Istanbul, Tel Aviv, and cities across Central Asia have become immediate destinations. Families are traveling together. Luggage is excessive. Return dates are conspicuously absent. These are the markers of relocation, not travel. At land borders, the picture is just as striking. Luxury vehicles registered to diplomatic or quasi-diplomatic entities have been crossing into neighboring countries in numbers that border officials describe as highly unusual. Guards report drivers who appear anxious, hurried, and unwilling to answer questions beyond what is strictly required. Some vehicles are packed with valuables that make little sense for a temporary trip. Jewelry, artwork, family heirlooms, the kinds of possessions people take only when they believe they may not be coming back. And here is the moment that changes how this story must be understood. This exodus is not being driven by battlefield losses, sanctions announcements, or public policy shifts. It is being driven by fear inside the system itself. The people leaving are not reacting to what they see on television. They are reacting to what they know. Investigative journalists inside and outside Russia have been able to identify a consistent profile among those departing. These are individuals with close ties to state contracts, defense industries, energy companies, and senior levels of government. People who attend the same meetings, share the same social circles, and hear the same private warnings. When someone from that world quietly removes their family from Moscow, it is rarely a coincidence. In several cases, departures follow a familiar and telling sequence. A businessman leaves first, files for residency abroad, and begins preparing assets for sale. Children are withdrawn from elite schools. Properties are quietly listed or transferred. In other cases, families leave while the official remains behind, a classic precaution when someone believes they may be under scrutiny but still hopes to manage events from within. These decisions are calculated, not impulsive, and they are being made by people trained to read risk for a living. Taken together, these movements form a pattern that cannot be dismissed. This is not opposition figures fleeing repression. This is the core constituency of the system hedging against it. And that distinction matters. Because when the beneficiaries of power begin to act as if power itself has become dangerous, it signals a shift that no amount of messaging can fully contain. This is the foundation for everything that follows. Before there is public unrest, before there are elite defections, before there are visible fractures at the top, there is this stage: quiet exits, silent calculations, planes lifting off in the dark. And once that stage begins, the trajectory of a political system is no longer entirely under its own control. To understand why this moment matters, we have to look past the departures themselves and focus on what triggered them. Elite flight does not happen because of rumor or fear alone. It happens when a system sends a signal that loyalty is no longer protection. And in Russia right now, that signal came through loud and clear. The recent arrests of senior officials did more than remove individuals from their positions. They shattered an unspoken contract that has defined power in modern Russia for years. The understanding was simple: serve the system, stay loyal, avoid public dissent, and you will be safe. Wealth, proximity, and usefulness were supposed to be shields. What the arrests revealed is that those shields can be taken away without warning. For people operating at the highest levels, this changes everything. When someone who sat in closed-door meetings, who signed off on sensitive decisions, who believed they were untouchable, is suddenly accused of betrayal, the message is unmistakable. No rank is permanent, no favor is binding, no past service guarantees future safety. This is where the calculation begins. And it is not an emotional one. It is cold, rational, and urgent. Those with the most to lose are forced to ask themselves a question they have avoided for years. If the system turns inward, will I be protected or will I be next? Here is the moment that defines this phase of the story, and it deserves your full attention. When the people who know the inner workings best decide that staying loyal is more dangerous than leaving quietly, the balance of fear inside the regime has shifted. That is not a rumor. That is a structural change. Analysts who study authoritarian systems recognize this pattern immediately. Arrests at the top do not create discipline, they create uncertainty. And uncertainty spreads faster among elites than among the general population. These are individuals who understand how quickly investigations can expand, how assets can be frozen, how travel permissions can disappear overnight. They also understand that once an exit closes, it rarely reopens. So decisions are made in private, often without consultation, often without explanation. A family leaves first. Money is moved in small increments. Lawyers abroad are contacted discreetly. Residency options are explored. None of this is dramatic, but all of it is decisive. It is the behavior of people preparing for a future they no longer trust the state to provide. What makes this especially destabilizing is that these individuals are not opponents of the system. They are its products. They rose because the system elevated them. Their flight is not ideological. It is pragmatic. And that makes it far more dangerous than open dissent. Because when fear replaces confidence at the top, the system does not collapse immediately. Instead, it begins to hollow out. Decisions become cautious. Initiative disappears. Loyalty becomes performative rather than real. And beneath the surface, everyone starts watching everyone else, waiting to see who moves next. This is the stage Russia appears to be entering now. Not collapse, not revolution, but something more subtle and more corrosive, a loss of internal trust among those who hold power. And once that trust is gone, no amount of control from above can fully restore it. As the elite quietly reposition themselves, the effects do not remain confined to private jets and border crossings. They ripple outward, into society, into perception, and into the fragile relationship between the state and the public. In Russia today, people may not see the full picture, but they are sensing that something is wrong. Despite tight media control, the signs are difficult to hide. Familiar faces vanish from public life. Children of senior officials are suddenly absent from elite schools. Luxury cars that once crowded Moscow's most exclusive districts appear less frequently. These details, small on their own, accumulate into something larger. In a system built on appearances, absence becomes a message. On social media, even under censorship, the tone has shifted. Comments circulate quietly, sometimes anonymously, sometimes in coded language. People are asking why those who urged sacrifice, endurance, and loyalty are now ensuring their own safety elsewhere. The question is not shouted, but it is repeated. And repetition gives it power. This resentment is not abstract. It is personal. Ordinary Russians are being asked to absorb economic strain, to accept losses, to believe in a future defined by hardship and confrontation. When they see the most privileged members of society insulating themselves from those same risks, the sense of unfairness becomes corrosive. Trust erodes not because of what is said, but because of what is done. Here's the moment where this story sharpens, and it deserves close attention. Authoritarian systems can survive military setbacks. They can survive sanctions. They can even survive widespread dissatisfaction. What they struggle to survive is the perception that the rules no longer apply equally, that loyalty flows only one way, and that belief in the system is optional for those at the top. For Vladimir Putin, this creates a uniquely dangerous dilemma. His authority rests not only on control, but on the idea that the state and its elite are aligned with the nation's fate. When that alignment fractures, even quietly, it undermines the narrative that binds the system together. The more the elite flee, the harder it becomes to convince the public that confidence remains intact. State media's response reflects this vulnerability. The story is largely ignored, not rebutted. There are no detailed explanations, no reassurance campaigns, no visible effort to counter the perception. Silence becomes the strategy. But silence, in this case, functions as confirmation rather than denial. People notice patterns, even without full information. They notice who leaves and who stays. They notice which families secure foreign options and which cannot. And inevitably, they begin to ask what the people leaving know that they do not. This is how legitimacy erodes in modern authoritarian states. Not through sudden revolt, but through accumulated doubt, through quiet anger, through the slow realization that those who shaped the current reality are no longer willing to live with it themselves. At this stage, the danger to the system is not mass protest. It is cynicism, it is disengagement, it is the loss of belief that sacrifice is shared. And once that belief is gone, restoring it becomes far more difficult than suppressing open opposition. As this story comes to a close, it is important to be clear about what this moment is and what it is not. The quiet departure of Russia's elite does not mean the system collapses tomorrow. It does not mean a sudden revolution or an imminent change of power. History tells us that authoritarian systems can endure long after warning signs appear. But history also tells us that these signs matter. We have seen this pattern before. In the final years of the Soviet Union, long before the flag came down, the people closest to power began securing foreign options. Families were sent abroad. Assets were quietly moved. Confidence faded privately long before it collapsed publicly. The same was true in Iran before the revolution of 1979 and in other regimes that appeared stable until they suddenly were not. The common thread is not panic, but preparation. What makes this moment so revealing is that it exposes a gap between words and belief. Official statements insist that everything is under control, that the future is secure, that sacrifice is necessary and shared, but actions tell a different story. When those with the most access, the most protection, and the most to lose decide that staying carries greater risk than leaving, they are revealing what they truly think lies ahead. For ordinary Russians, this realization carries weight. It forces an uncomfortable question. If the people who know the system best are preparing an exit, what does that say about the future they are asking everyone else to accept? That question lingers, even when it cannot be asked openly. It shapes attitudes. It reshapes trust. And over time, it changes how power is perceived. For Vladimir Putin, this is a challenge that cannot be solved with force alone. Military defeats can be reframed, economic hardship can be blamed on external enemies, but the loss of confidence among one's own elite is harder to disguise and nearly impossible to reverse. Once belief fractures at the top, control becomes more brittle, more reactive, and more dependent on fear rather than loyalty. So the significance of this moment is not measured in headlines or official announcements. It is measured in departures that go unreported, in families that vanish quietly, in decisions made behind closed doors. These are the early signals of strain within a system that demands certainty but can no longer provide it. In the end, this story is not about jets or borders or even arrests. It is about faith in a future. And right now, the people who are supposed to believe in that future most strongly are acting as if they no longer do. When that happens, the truth has already begun to surface, even if no one is yet willing to say it out loud.